Today we're going to go over a few things. We're going to start just for a quick overview of the agenda. Chief Clive Weighill is going to give about a 20-minute presentation addressing overview of what's happening in the city around crime and what's changed or improved or gotten worse over the last 10 years. And then we're going to have a panelist presentation. So we're going to have Candace Wascase-Lafferty, Tracy Mugley, Candace Scrappick, Sultan Ali, and Father Andre from various organizations, and I'll explain them a little bit later, to talk about 4 specific areas that the Commission is looking to get feedback on.
Okay, what I want to do is just give you a little bit of an overview of the Saskatoon Police Service, what our proactive, reactive parts are, how we're kind of set up so you get an idea how complex the service really is. And then I want to talk about some of the issues that are facing Saskatoon, then some of the good things that are happening with our police service, and then we'll end it off with a few of the efficiencies that we've had at the service too. So bear with me for about 20 minutes, and I think we'll probably give you a policing 101 talk tonight. But what we're trying to show here is that the service is really broke up into 3 big areas. We have a reactive area here, which is our patrol units, traffic, victim services, our criminal investigation, which are our plainclothes officers, detention, communications, and service center, which is our front desk. So that's kind of the reactive arm of the police service. Then over on this side we have our proactive arm, where we have our school resource officers, cultural resource officers, community liaison officers that work in the different divisions on crime prevention, and our crime-free multi-housing program, which works with landlords in the city here to make places safer to rent and for renters to rent. Then there's a crossover of quite a few of our units. For instance, patrol, they don't just do reactive things, they do proactive work as well too, helping people out. Same as traffic, we do education through our traffic, victim services. Our school resource officers, they're not only proactive, they handle most of the calls in our schools as well too. What we found is it's very hard for a patrol officer to go to a school if they don't know the teachers, they don't know the students. It's a lot better for a school resource officer that knows those people. They can go in and do the mediation, they can do the teaching that has to happen in the school. It'd be awful hard just for a patrol officer to go in cold into the schools. Our media and our community mobilization, which is ourselves, social services, health, mental health, education, working together on high-risk individuals here in the community. So those are kind of our sworn officers, mainly it's our special constables that work in detention and communication. And then we have a huge wing as well that a lot of people don't think about, and that's the support that we have to have. We have to have human resources. We've got to make sure we hire the right people, we retain them, we train them properly. We do a lot of screening when we hire our officers. Our IT areas, we run on IT, our computer systems, our data banks, our finance section, our fleet. We have a whole big fleet that we have to maintain. Our communications center, court services, cultural services, and our readers. All that work that gets done behind the scenes. And we have probably about 157 civilian employees. So we have quite a few civilian employees at our service. Just to give you an idea how it's kind of comprised, about 45% of our working staff, this is sworn and civilian, would work in our patrol area. About 23% work in our criminal investigations area, about 18% in administration, 10% in asset management, and about 4% in the executive offices and the public affairs. And if you drill down a little further, and this, I don't expect anybody to remember all this, but just trying to give you a snapshot of how we're comprised. In our patrol area, that's our frontline officers. About 49% are people that answer the 911 calls or answer the calls for service in the patrol cars. 1% is crime-free multi-housing, 11% is traffic, 4% is our combined traffic, that's the RCMP and our city police that do the highways around Saskatoon. SGI pays for those officers, 10 officers that they pay for Saskatoon, so it was a real good deal for us. Those officers also spend about a third of their time in Saskatoon, not just around it. School resource officers, cultural, weekend support, canine. PACT is an interesting one. That we have four people in that area, 2 civilians and 2 officers. It's a police and a crisis team where we team up a police officer with a mental health professional to help us deal with people that are afflicted with mental health. Of course, you have our beat officers and our bike unit. So that kind of comprises the big area for our uniform members. Then criminal investigations is about 23% of our organization. Quite a few of the positions in there are paid for by the province of Saskatchewan. We have 51 positions paid for at our service by the province. That brings in about $6 million just for the people in criminal investigations. So that means that's 51 officers that the City of Saskatoon taxpayers don't have to pay for off our own budget here. That's paid for by the province. It's a really good deal, but the problem is sometimes with that is they've got a very strict mandate. So we can't move those officers around. For instance, we have a show cap program. Well, the province is paid for that. Show cap is for habitual offenders. They want us to stay on that mandate. So we can't move our officers off to put into some other unit. They have to work for what the province is paying for on the mandate. So about 10% is general investigations. They work on break-and enters and major thefts. 15% is target enforcement, which is work on armed robberies, street robberies, major assaults. Major crime works on homicides. Forensic identification, you all watch CSI. We have our own small CSI section here in Saskatoon. SIDES, which is our street unit for our drugs, that's combined with the RCMP. CFSEU, which is our Combined Forces Special Enforcement Unit, paid for by the province for organized crime. Our street gang unit, integrated intelligence, economic crime, sex abuse, child abuse section. So you can see there's a lot of specialized units within that area that all require specialized training. And last but not least, I talked about our administration area, and this kind of gives you a little bit of a snapshot of that. About 11% is detention. 37% would be our communication area and the people that work in central records putting our information into our data banks. Court preparation, finance, IT, and human resources. And that brings up a big portion of our administration area. Now, most people think, why do we want more police? What's going on? Crime is dropping in the city. We're down about 45%. Why do we need more police? Well, it's really changed the mosaic of Saskatoon and what we're dealing with and right across Canada. So this is our top 20 calls for service at the Saskatoon Police Service. The ones in red are ones that we would signify as real crime issues. The ones in blue are ones that the police attend. You can see a majority of those that a lot of times are non-crime. So about 80% of our frontline resources in patrol are answering to non-crime issues, not crime issues. So for instance, our top call for service in the city, we get dispatched 6,335 times every year to disturbances. We don't know what's happening. It could be a noisy bunch of kids at the park. It could be a fight on a corner. It may be crime. It may not be crime. Alarms, 5,800 alarms we go to every year. About 98% of the alarms we go to are false. It's a big drain on our resources. We do have an alarm policy here. Anybody in the city of Saskatoon that does have an alarm, if we have to go to their residence or their business more than 3 times in a year, they have to start paying for the police to go to those, and they get what we call a small fine, and they have to pay into the police service for that, so they don't get it for free after the 3rd time. Suspicious persons, 5,700 calls for service every year, where we dispatch a car and somebody's phoning in, there's a suspicious person in my neighborhood, somebody's walking up and down the back alley, there's somebody in my backyard. Drunkenness, 4,600 calls for service we go to. Domestics, 4,600, which we all know are some of the most dangerous calls that police officers can attend. Unknown problem, 3,800 calls. Unknown problem, usually somebody calls in on 911, they hang up. We don't know what the problem is. We can't just ignore it. Somebody could be in trouble. We usually end up sending 1 or 2 cars to a call like that just to make sure people are safe in that house and that the 911 call, they weren't in distress and had to hang up before we could get there. Suspicious vehicles, 2,700. Accidents, 2,600 calls we go to. I won't bore you with all these. There we go, all the way down here before we actually see a crime. Thefts, 1,900 that we attend by dispatch. Break and enter down here. Impaired drivers possibly. Then missing persons. 1,530 dispatch calls we have a year for missing persons. We have over 1,600 missing person reports a year in Saskatoon. 1,600. We have to put a report on each one of those, put them on CPIC, try and get photos from the family, do media releases. It could be a young girl, young boy that's living in a care home that's run 40 or 45 times already in a year. But we know that a lot of them are probably living a lifestyle that may put them in danger if we don't find them right away. So we have to put a lot of resources to missing persons. Noise complaints, standby to assist. Standby to assist may mean a domestic dispute where the husband and wife are fighting over the property. They've got a court order. Police have to stand by there until we can get the property out of the house so that there's no violence that happens between the couple. Attempted suicides, 1,137 attempt suicides we go through every year. Can you imagine that? That's 3 or 4 attempt suicides every day in Saskatoon that we attend. Assaults, and then noisy parties, about 1,000. So there you go. That's our top 20 calls for service. So if you're wondering what our demand for service is, that's what's driving our demand. It's not crime per se. We're down about 47% in crime. It's these calls here that are taking up our time and that are really taking up a lot of our investigative capability. Now I'd like to walk you through a timeline of a call, just so you can see some of the work that goes into a call. This is would be what we'd say is a typical armed robbery. And we get about 300 armed robberies in the city of Saskatoon every year, and we get about another 350 or 400 street robberies. So initially the call comes in, a patrol unit is dispatched. At the scene, we have to interview the victim and the witnesses. There could be quite a few. K9 unit always gets dispatched if there's an armed robbery. We always have to send a perimeter, a minimum of 4 officers, because if we want to, we always have to kind of surround the area in case anybody leaves. So that means it's a drain of 4 officers right away to go to that call. We have to take fingerprints. We have to process the scene, so somebody has to come out for forensic identification, process the scene for DNA, fingerprints, tire tracks, anything they can find. Have to seize any videos for evidence. Almost every business in town now seems to have a video camera somewhere in their business, especially at banks and convenience stores, so we can harvest a lot of evidence through the videos. Interview the witnesses and the suspects, seize any suspect clothing, weapons or disguises, or any vehicle, anything that's left at the scene that we can seize right away. A report is taken by the officer. It takes quite some time to do that report. Then we have to have somebody transcribe it and enter it into our databanks. Then the court documents have to get prepared and sworn to by the police if we have somebody charged. Victim services contacts the victims and provides information and support. And you'd be surprised at how many people are victimized. I don't imagine it would be a surprise. If you're working at a bank or a convenience store and you've just been held up and had a gun shoved in your face, it's very traumatic. And we'd like to have our victim services come out and talk to those folks. Then we have to get our media people involved. We've got to put out a media release, notify the public of the event, possibly generate some tips from the community and maybe through Crime Stoppers. Now, I'll take you to two more scenarios stemming from this. That's not all the work. So now, first off, if the suspect is arrested, we have to process that person and put them into detention, so we have to have people take care of them. We have to process them, fingerprint them, photograph them. Then they're held in our detention area until they appear in court. If they're going to plead guilty, a pre-sentence report has to be completed by our officers and social services and mental health maybe. If they plead not guilty, we have to attend a bail hearing because we're going to try to hold them in court in the detention area or in the PCC because we don't want them back on the street again if they've already committed an armed robbery. If they are released from the court, then we have to get conditions put on them, and then it's up to us. We have to check them on their conditions every night to make sure that they're in and obeying by their conditions. We have to subpoena, or we have to do the prosecutor casework, which is a lot of paperwork. A subpoena for all the civilian and police witnesses to appear at the trial. Then the police and civilian witnesses have to be interviewed by the Crown before the case to make sure that the Crown and the prosecutor know what they're going to talk about it. And then the witnesses, police witnesses, surveillance evidence, all the exhibits, all have to be presented to the judge for a decision on guilty or innocent. So there's a lot of work involved in one case. If the suspect isn't arrested, so now we've got an ongoing investigation, which even takes us longer now. Reports are transcribed and the exhibits have to be entered into storage because we have to keep all those exhibits in case we do get somebody arrested for this. The case is reviewed by a specialized investigative unit for a follow-up. A lead investigator is assigned to the case, has to review all the evidence, review all the witnesses, look at all the video evidence. We'll probably do some Crime Stoppers reenactments to try and stimulate some conversation about it. Suspect photos will be put up on our website. The investigator is going to search all our data banks, speak to our patrol officers, search for information and other descriptions for the suspects. Neighborhoods have to be canvassed for additional new witnesses. We have to interview the suspects and use maybe a polygraph operator if we have a suspect. And if there is insufficient evidence exists after all this has been exhausted, the file would be concluded pending new information. So that's a lot of work off of one file. One file. Now, what's some of the major changes that we're seeing in the city of Saskatoon and I think right across policing in North America? Number one is the internet. And we all know how that's changed our lives. We all live on the internet. We all live through different medias. So that's stemmed a lot of things that are happening on social media, stemming bullying, child pornography, frauds, investigations that are very, very lengthy, maybe national, maybe even lead internationally. We have to have a lot of people that know technology, a lot of people that can work in this world. Drugs is certainly a big issue for Saskatoon. Methamphetamine is alive and well in our streets. It's driving a lot of our street crime, thefts from vehicles, theft of vehicles, thefts from garages and sheds. We're seeing people coming in from outside of the city, from places like Vancouver, Toronto, Edmonton, wanting to sell drugs because it's a very lucrative market. And of course, we're seeing the gang activity that's associated with that, and unfortunately some of the violence that we see associated with the gang activity and protecting their own turf, fighting for areas, and wanting to make sure they take care of the drug areas that they have. Legislation has changed in the last couple of decades. A lot of work for our officers, especially with paperwork. Disclosure. Anytime we arrest somebody, we have to have a full disclosure package ready to give to the Crown of all the evidence that we have, the whole file, all the pictures, all the evidence, because that has to be disclosed to a defense lawyer. So our officers have to prepare those cases to send over to the Crown. The paperwork is phenomenal. Transcription, if we take a statement from anybody, almost all the statements that we take now at headquarters are all done through video and audio. If somebody's a witness, we even take video and audio statements from them on major occurrences, because a lot of times what we find is they'll recant their story. They may get threatened or intimidated, and they want to recant their story. We want to make sure that we get it on audio and video, so if they try to recant their story, we have the evidence there that we need. But somebody has to transcribe all that. Somebody has to cut the videos. Somebody has to prepare that all for court. And then warrants. When I started, if there was a warrant for somebody's arrest, we could go knock on the door. If we knew he was in the house, we could use whatever force was necessary to get in the house to arrest him. But we can't do that anymore. Even if we have a warrant for somebody's arrest, and we know they're in the house, they can be looking out the window at us, we have to go back and get what's called a Feeney warrant from a judge to authorize us now to go into the house and arrest the guy. So we go to the house, we knock on the door, we see him standing in the house, we can't go in after him, we have to go put 4 officers around the house, watch the house so he or she doesn't leave. Then we have to go get a court order from a judge, which could take a half a day, and then we go back and arrest the person. So that's really bogging us down, slowing us down, and taking our members off the street for a lot of things they could be doing. Social interaction that we're having. Mental health is a big issue right across North America. We're encountering more and more people all the time on the street with mental health issues, homeless issues, drug issues, substance abuse issues that are taking up a lot of our time. Sometimes spending hours at a time, maybe at the hospital emergency, trying to get somebody in to get looked at for mental health issues. Of course, we see the issue of panhandlers downtown and homeless people. The Hub Community Mobilization is a group of social workers, health, mental health, and education that meet twice a week and work on high-risk individuals within the city to try and help them and their families out of high-risk lifestyle issues that they have. Police and crisis teams I talked about a little bit earlier on. We pair up a police officer and a mental health specialist to help us deal with people that are suffering from mental health issues on calls. It's very hard for a constable to attend a call, answering a call with somebody that's got schizophrenia. The constable, we can train them only so far. They're not mental health professionals, they're police officers. So then we would call in the PACT unit. The PACT unit would have better connections into mental health, get them in through the gatekeepers of the mental health system, and it works a lot better for us. And then, of course, we have our cultural unit. We have 7 members in our culture unit. We have the largest culture unit per capita of any service across the prairies, that's for sure. And we put a lot of effort into our Aboriginal community, First Nations, Métis, New Canadians. We have an interpreters program. We can interpret about 85 different languages and about 150 different dialects in the city of Saskatoon here, but we have to train those interpreters and have them on a call-out basis. Of course, another major change, is no surprise to anybody, is our population and our growth. We've grown about 55,000 people here since 2005, and we've added in areas like Stonebridge, Rosewood, Evergreen, Willow Grove, Hampton, Kensington, Blairmore, never mind all the people that are coming in from Mormon and Martinsville and Corman Park and all the surrounding areas that come into the city of Saskatoon and create issues for us, for traffic, issues for us all over the place because of all the extra people that we have in the city. And then unfortunately, we still continue to see the devolution of from the federal government to the provincial government, from the provincial government to the municipalities, and the buck stops, unfortunately, a lot of times at the police service. Because besides fire and EMS, we're probably about the last 24/7 institution left. So at 2 o'clock in the morning, we're about the last gasp anybody has to phone if they have an issue. So we end up doing a lot of social work, a lot of issues through the nighttime hours and on the weekends, because there just simply is not another institution there to take care of those calls. Now, some of the good news, we've certainly come down on crime. We're down about 47% in crime since about 2003. We had 34,000 criminal code incidents in Saskatoon in 2003, and we're down to 21,900 by 2013. The Stats Canada stats for 2014 will be out next month. We're seeing a small rise, unfortunately, towards the end of 2013 and through 2014 in property crime. We're up about 17% so far this year in property crime. Primarily theft from auto and theft of autos and mischiefs. We just completed the Insitrix Satisfaction Survey. It's a survey that we do every 3 years. We commission Insitrix Service to do that for us. And I've got a whole presentation on that, but just to give you a couple of things out of that. Generally, I think our service is doing very well. 92%. The last 2 surveys of the people surveyed say they're somewhat or very satisfied with our service. certainly up from where it was in 2005. So we're going the right way, and I think with all the controversy in the United States about policing and use of force of police in the United States, I know there's going to be a bit of a spillover to how people think about Canadian policing, although we are a whole different model of policing than they are in the United States. But there's bound to be a bit of a spillover on how people see policing. Also in that survey, we asked people, what do you think the most important issues facing Saskatoon are? Number one, traffic. And if you went back to the 2003 survey, 2005, 2008, 2011, traffic was number one. Almost any survey I ever see dealing with police, traffic is a number one issue. People want to make sure their kids get home from school safe, can get around the city safe. Number two was gang activity. If you went back to the 2003 survey, gang activity was about 0.5%. People's perceptions have really changed about what's happening in the city of Saskatoon. Drugs was number three all the way along. And number four right now is robberies. And if you went back to 2005, 2008, it would have been break and enters. So our break and enters are down about half of what they were. So you can see a lot of people are actually realizing that, and they're seeing what are causing the issues in Saskatoon. And it is issues along drugs, robberies, and the gang activity that we have to be concerned with. This is a chart that signifies a question that's asked on the Saskatoon Civic Survey every year. It's a survey that's conducted by the city. They want to see if people are happy with the police department, fire department, waterworks, garbage pickup. And they're asking all kinds of questions about the city departments. And one of the questions that they ask is, what's the single most important issue facing Saskatoon? And back in 2003, 43% of the respondents, by and far the number one issue in Saskatoon was crime and policing. And you can see over the last decade how that perception has changed. It hovered around the 30 mark here till about 2006, 7. Then it dropped to 19, 18, 16, 12, 8, 4. And now it's climbed up a little bit here to 9%. That's a marked change in people's perceptions. Right now it's roads, homes, other things along the line, along the softer, more social issues in Saskatoon that we're seeing, not crime and policing. If you wonder why there's two lines on this chart, this line here, the light blue, is telephone, and the dark blue is internet responses. So we started doing internet responses, or the company did, in 2010. And you can see the dark blue ones are a little bit higher, and we find that whenever you're doing surveys and you have people that can answer on the internet, usually they're a little bit more harsh on the internet because it's easier to be a little harsh when you're just hitting buttons than if you're actually talking to somebody. But you can see the trend is still the same. The people are worried less about crime and policing than they have been in the past. And a little bit internally in our service as well too, we have a joint management association morale committee, and we do a survey every 3 years of our staff. We ask them about 45, 50 different questions. But just to give you a snapshot about how morale has changed in our service, back in 2005, about 79% of our officers said we had poor morale, and that's only down to about 14% now saying that. Job satisfaction is at 89%, and they enjoy working for the service at 93%. I tell you, I'd put that up against any police service in Canada right now. We have a very, very committed workforce, very engaged. They work really, really hard. People are always concerned about how much budget we're taking. Yes, we are a large portion of the city budget. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But we have tried to find as many efficiencies in what we can do over the past few years. We were up to about 24% of the gross budget, 2007, and we're down to about 20.5% now of the budget. So we're taking a smaller slice of the civic budget every year. And one last slide, people say, well, have you done anything for any efficiencies at the service over the last while? Well, this is just kind of encapsulates a few. We've done 2 redeployments. We did a redeployment in 2007. We had an audit done from Prosser and Associates in 2006, and they said we needed 32 more officers on patrol. We found those 32 officers internally without having to hire extra officers. We've just done another redeployment exercise this year, and we'll be moving 16 officers from the criminal investigation area mainly back to patrol here on July the 1st. We instituted online reporting. We get about 4,500 reports now online, so we don't have to dispatch our police officers to those calls, which cuts down on our dispatch calls for service and allows our officers more time to do what they need to do. Civilianization. We civilianized areas in planning, crime analysis, cultural relations, and media. Almost our whole administrative wing now is civilianized, whether it be human resources, our IT, our asset management, fleet. It's all done by civilians rather than police officers. We have a lot of integration. Our drug unit is integrated with the RCMP. Our organized crime area is integrated with the RCMP. So is child exploitation. and so is criminal intelligence. So there's a lot to be gained when we put our units together. We have a good synergy between the RCMP and us. We also implemented ComStat, which is computer-aided statistics, which gives us a good view of what's happening in the city of Saskatoon. Every day at 6 o'clock, our crime analysts come in. They map what's happened for the previous 24 hours for crime. We hold weekly and monthly ComStat meetings where the deputy chief challenges the divisional commanders on why is crime going up in their area or why is crime going down in their area and what are they doing about it. And it allows us then to be very reactive to moving our resources where we really need them into hotspot areas. We formulated the Action Accord, which was a partnership with the Saskatoon Tribal Council, the FSIN, Saskatoon Health Region, and the Board of Police Commissioners and the Police Service. The idea of that was to try to reduce the number of intoxicated persons that we were holding in our detention areas. We'd had 4 or 5 people pass away in our detention area over the years. We were housing people in there that had been arrested for public intoxication. We had no idea what they'd ingested before they got arrested. You think they're sleeping in their cell and they don't wake up. So we've taken a concentrated effort. Thanks very much to the health region. They funded paramedics to the tune of $150,000 down in our cell block. So when people come in now, they get checked immediately by a paramedic. And through the Action Accord and working with the Lighthouse, we've reduced by over 30% the number of people that we house now for public intoxication in our detention area, because we could get them to the Lighthouse where they have stabilization for the night and they don't be spending time in our cells. And we shouldn't have people in our cells for non-criminal activity. If it's a health issue, a social issue, mental health issue, substance abuse issue, they should not be housed in a police cell. Our IT area, we saved about $200,000 on a different way that we've mobilized desktops off our desks. And special duty, we're bringing in about $145,000 extra every year. We started to charge people if you're having a large public event where you're serving liquor and you're making money, and you're going to have a large crowd there that's probably going to need some extra police presence. You're going to have to pay for that police presence rather than the taxpayer of Saskatoon, because it's a big drain on our service. If you have a large gathering where they're serving alcohol, that means we have to pull our people off the street to help police it, or the crowds that are coming and going from that event. It's a big strain. So we've worked with the city council and the board to drive policy, and if you're going to have a big event, and I'm not talking 10 or 15 people or a street party or something like that, a block party. I'm talking a big event where you're going to have 1,000 people, and people are going to be drinking, and it's going to be a large crowd, and you're going to make money off of that. It's incumbent upon you. That's the cost of doing business. You've got to have the police there. You're going to pay for it. So that's some of the efficiencies that we've worked on. And I hope that gives you kind of a snapshot of the service. It's very complicated. It's not just simply police officers driving around in a patrol car and pulling people over and writing them tickets. There's a lot more to our work than that. And a lot of the cases that we work on are very intensive, very long to take care of, and very expensive. We had the project for SETI in the spring here where we took down some of the motorcycle gangs in town here. One day alone, it cost us $100,000. We had to have 85 officers in to do all those hits. $85,000 just that one day for the overtime we had to call those officers in. So a lot of those things, people wonder, why does it cost so much money? To get the job done, unfortunately, sometimes you have to have the people there, and it does cost, or you're not going to be effective or efficient. So if anybody, if I have any questions, or am I out of time? I'm done. When I get the mic, it's hard to get out of my hand. Thank you very much.